Good morning, everyone. I'm Kevin Mulhern, CEO and co-founder of AdvisorStream. I'll be your moderator today. I want to welcome and thank all of you for dedicating some of your morning to this session. And I want to thank you for your willingness to voluntarily join yet another video session in this year of nothing but virtual events. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by three industry leaders, each with a unique perspective created through their decades of experience in wealth management, technology, and publishing. Ryan Daly-Giarda is the Director of Product Development at Barron's. She manages all of Barron's digital products that reach over 10 million monthly visitors, among them likely most of you. Ryan has a background in research and analytics, so her product development style is both audience-led and data-informed. She led the Barrons.com redesign, steering the digital transformation of one of the world's most trusted publications and market information to a wide audience, publications and one that investors depend on every day. Her team's redesign successfully lifted user engagement across the entire Barron's platform and can serve as a great example of how to effectively communicate complex investments and market information to a wide audience. William Trout almost needs no introduction. He's a true thought leader in technology, strategy, and innovation in both the wealth and asset management industries. He consults firms globally, and William holds an AB from Harvard College. Currently at Javelin, William previously led the wealth management practice at Celent, the research and advisory arm of Oliver Wyman. Before that, he was head of product and segment development for affluent and high net worth customers within BBVA USA, as well as a member of the BBVA Group Global Private Banking Management Team. You may know William as a keynote speaker at conferences like Pershing or Advicent, or as an authority on digital advice delivery, widely quoted in publications such as the Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg, the New York Times, Financial Times, and CNBC. Valerie Mosley is the founder of Upward Wealth, a fintech platform that democratizes the creation of personal and financial wealth. She also serves on the corporate boards of Envestnet, DraftKings, Groupon, and Eaton Vance family of funds. Valerie was the president of the student body at Duke and earned her MBA in finance at the Wharton School of Business. Valerie brings a unique perspective to our discussion today because of her core belief that one's worth must not be a function of one's wealth. She enjoys investing and advising companies and organizations that add value to both investors and to society. And Valerie has received numerous awards, including 50 Most Powerful Women in Business, the International Person of the Year by the UK Power List, Top 75 African Americans on Wall Street by Black Enterprise Magazine. So those are our panelists. Let's begin our session. The Great Wealth Transfer. I know it's a topic that has been talked about for years, many years, but it has kicked off in earnest. And I'm certain everyone here today is well aware of this historic transfer. Today, we're going to specifically focus on the dynamics of the Great Wealth Transfer. We will highlight clear dangers for client retention and book value, as well as highlight tactics that can make this transfer the largest growth opportunity to ever present itself to today's advisors and wealth firms. The big winners will be the firms that crack the code on forming household-wide relationships, building trust with Xers, and relevance with millennials, as well as provide the tools needed to deliver the services these younger investors will expect. So to set the stage, let's highlight a few key facts and get started. Here's what we know. We know that wealth is always in motion to the tune of a couple $1 trillion every couple years, but the next 20 years will see an estimated transfer of 68 trillion in US dollars, 5 trillion pounds in the UK, and more than $1 trillion in Canada. This will be a transfer from baby boomers to Gen X and millennial heirs. In fact, by 2025, Gen X will control more wealth than boomers. And the vast majority of Gen X and millennials do not currently work with an advisor, and 87% of these investors do not choose typically to continue to work with their parents' advisors. We know each year going forward, A growing number of young investors are going to be inheriting huge sums of money and will be finding a new advisor and or services to help manage their newfound wealth in a way that suits their personal lives and their unique worldview. Huge sums of money. Will be finding a new advisor or those advisors that add a digital approach to the current client experience will have a much higher rate of client and asset retention, and will be well positioned after this new breed of investor and greatly grow AUM by capturing some of the trillions in assets that will be looking to grow AUM. So today, we will attempt to provide actionable advice as to what wealth managers can do to change the fact that 87% of beneficiaries will not be advisors, but rather choose to help direct or find a new home for their assets. So today's panel session is in 3 parts. Number 1, understanding the family dynamic. Number 2, cultivating relationships with the next generation. And number 3, the importance of content and communications. So let's get started with part 1, understanding the family dynamic. So let's get started here. I'm gonna go to you, Will, first. Very simple question that I think everyone kind of has a notion of or has asked themselves. Death and finances can be a very taboo topic, a conversation hard to get started. So how do advisors start a conversation with their clients about inheritance, and why is that important now?
It's a great question, Kevin, and certainly COVID-19 and the pandemic has brought questions of mortality and legacy into very sharp focus. When you're talking with clients about inheritance, of course, you're probably talking about it in 2 ways, right? One is middle-aged clients in a position to receive inheritance from their parents, or clients looking to pass on wealth to the next generation. In both cases, death is something that needs to be handled with sensitivity. It's never an easy topic, but it's a very important one, both in terms of the I's that need to be dotted and T's that need to be crossed, and also in terms of giving clients a sense of control over the destiny and the destiny over the destiny of their loved ones. I think the takeaway here in any case is don't count your chickens. Don't count your chickens before they're hatched. Clients expecting to receive an inheritance to fund their lifestyle or even bail them out may be sorely disappointed when in fact Uncle Bob gets a little testy and decides to cut them out, or a parent suffers a financial shortfall and isn't transmitting wealth to the degree that's expected. And certainly the costs of healthcare, given our COVID aside, given longevity and sort of expectations for longevity, mean that there may not be any money left. So don't count your chickens. Don't plan on buying that fancy sports car. Save up, invest. All those conversations need to be focused on having a plan.
Okay, great. No, that's great. And also, some clients have very specific goals and values that they want their children to kind of embrace and adopt and carry forward, ranging from charitable giving and investment philosophies, perhaps around value investing or ethical funds. And so Val, I'm going to ask you, so how can wealth managers work with their clients and their children to make sure that those values are aligned, or that they even understand each other's values?
I'm muted.
Thank you. It's so important that you connect with the family members. And what we know is historically, wealth managers have tended more often than not to focus on the person who had most of the control, which was the father who provided. And what we know is that there's a huge trend where women increasingly, 1, are going to get that transfer, and 2, are heads of households. Yet they don't fully understand, nor are they very comfortable with aspects around financial literacy. So it's really important, I think, that the wealth managers include the women in the conversation. And what we know is that 2/3 currently of baby boomers which is the majority of the assets currently, are held jointly by joint households. Yet the woman is not very involved. And it is helpful if all members feel like they're a part, because to the extent that someone is excluded, they're less likely to be trusting of the person who's been giving the advice. Hence, the stat that you shared earlier could continue to remain. But as we're talking about wealth transfers, it's critically important that you get the involvement and the engagement of all of the members of the family. And we're talking specifically about the children, and you're thinking about the values. The key there is just listening. So if you have the children around the table, I think that if you make sure that you're aligned with your values, you ask your client and you say, I would really like to get your children involved here, just bring them all in. And I would highly encourage you just to listen. You ask an open-ended question and just listen. And you'll glean so much more just from that listening. That is, what are their values? What do they care about? Because what we know is that millennials care so much more about different types of products, and you'll be able to better serve them and not lose the business.
Okay, so that makes a ton of sense. So as Will said, don't count your chickens before they're hatched, and probably go listen to those chickens to make sure you know if they're going to hatch, and if they hatch, kind of what is important to them, what's important to the family, to all the members of the family, and really focus on literacy for all members, starting with the spouse. We're forgetting that
Yes.
kind of key. I think I read a vast majority of inheritance transfers today are still lateral, right? And then that goes to the spouse, and then the spouse will really be choosing that alpha child if there is one. So don't count your chickens. Literacy, 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 and listen, listen, listen. I think that's kind of what I'm hearing here. So that's great. One last kind of question in this first section, and then we're going to move on more into content and communications. But what are some of the challenges? What are some of the challenges and opportunities wealth managers could encounter with non-traditional blended families, and how to meet these evolving needs? Because we are seeing shifting demographics quickly now in the family makeup. So I'll just open that one up to Will or Val or Ryan.
Yeah, I'll just jump in quickly and pass the baton, Kevin. I mean, as you were saying, and Val was pointing out, you've got to engage the spouse. That's 100% true. In many cases, however, there may not be a spouse. And I think now nearly a third of all families are single family households. And even when it's, a traditional couple, it's really not that traditional at all, in that many of these individuals living together are not going to be married, right? Regardless of whether they're, same sex, different sex or not. And so I think I saw a stat from the US Census Bureau. I mean, in the US, married couples are less than 50% of all households now. And, back in our day, maybe it was my day, in 1970, it was almost 3/4 of couples were in fact married. So that's changed the landscape.
It really has. And just to follow up on that point, what we know is that there are many single heads of households as well. And if you're going to support this demographic, you have to think about, how do you make things easier? So use technology. How do you make sure that the information that the end user is getting informs and instills that trust? That you're thinking also about what that head of household is considering, i.e. the children. So I think that if you lead with how to solve what is a problem for the person that you're serving, you're more likely to get much more success. The other thing that I think is really important, and this is something that you won't read it necessarily in the books, is the psychological. If you look at the trends again, you have to make sure that your mindset is really open to things that are different. So many years ago, you talked about, well, the family structure, what it was, it's different. Nowadays, there are things as simple as tattoos, things that were taboo, which are much more normal. So you have to come with a really open mind to say, I am going to embrace what is different. The number of LGBTQ communities, which again, at one point was really taboo, it's not. So I would encourage you to just make sure that your mind is open when you're thinking about trying to work with the transfer generation. Otherwise, people who have been sort of ignored or judged will pick it up really quickly, and that will kill your ability to engender trust. And so broadening your mind for that acceptance is really, really important.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. I mean, so there are a lot of challenges ahead for all wealth firms and advisors, and a lot of that is getting into the new mindset. But the reality of the families we're going to serve are going to be different than what we've been used to. So I think that's pretty straightforward stuff, but stuff that today we finally have to prepare for, right? Ourselves, our firms, and even the makeup of the employees in our firms to serve that new demographic and those new types of families. Okay, let's move on to part two. Cultivating relationships with the next generation. I think this is going to be a fun section. Just to give it a little bit of a setup here, it might seem obvious that communicating with the entire household is critical, but few advisors are actually communicating with the next generation, with the children. So if you want to secure your firm's value from the coming attrition driven by mass wealth transfer, you need to start by creating a digital first relationship with the younger members of a household. A digital first approach also transcends geography. Your clients' children, regardless of where they choose to live, if they are well served, could provide a pipeline of referrals from their circle of friends and their networks that are those younger investors that are looking for a more modern digital approach to being served, getting advice. So incredibly, advisors were quick to embrace technology in light of the global pandemic that hit us about a year ago. And the inability to meet face-to-face with clients really forced all firms to really get prepared for a digital first relationship. So that's a good thing by surprise, I suppose. But the results of that is advisors were using Zoom calls and different digital communications to bridge the gap, and in many cases are now prepared to communicate with the next generation. So what was once scary pre-COVID is kind of the new normal now. So we are increasingly at AdvisorStream, we're increasingly seeing advisors, particularly RIAs on our platform, that are servicing families in many cities and many states, in fact. So client relationships and your communications are no longer bound by geography, city, or state in the digital world. So I'm going to open it up from there. And Val, I'll start with you and then go to Ryan. Val, how can a wealth manager initiate or form a relationship with their clients' children and younger investors in general? You touched on that, but can you go a little bit deeper?
Sure, happy to do that. Education is key. And again, if you come in and you help someone see possibilities, it builds trust. And I would suggest that you have more webisodes and have information and content that is going to speak to this demographic. So think about the demographic change. They tend to have, women are leading more, they have more education, it's much more diverse, and much of the content that wealth managers have is more monochromatic, if you will. So if you invite the children to come in, you teach them and make sure that you deliver some content that is going to be trustworthy or relatable, most important, then I think you win them over. So content is definitely key. That's a hook. And after that, I think you have to think about the values that this demographic also cares so much more about investing with the heart, if you will. So the ESG trend is really quite impressive and having specific impacts. So you want to make sure that your products that you're offering also are much more expansive. I invested in a company called Ethic, for example, that can take any index around the world and cull it for your individual values. You want to make sure that look into Ethic, and so that when you're talking to them, you're going to be able to speak to them about values that they have. So first it's listen. The other is content allows you to connect, set up webisodes, listen again about what's on their mind, and then deliver what they want. And often what they want is something where they can invest and have an impact.
Okay, great. That's interesting. Actually, this morning, I saw a white paper come out from Cerulli that said 83% of U.S. retail investors, so 83% of U.S. retail investor households prefer to invest in companies that are leaders actually in environmental responsibility. So we are seeing this ESG trend, but there are a lot of other trends. I'm going to get Ryan into the conversation here Val, you just said that content is becoming extremely important. I think you used the word hook. So let's go to a true leader in content on this in the world. Ryan, any thoughts around how we can use content to start these conversations and relationships?
Absolutely, Kevin. And at the Barron's Group, we've done a lot of market research in thinking about how do we reach that next generation of investors. And we've done quite a bit of study. And I think the headline is to not make assumptions, right? Each investor is truly unique. And I think it's very important to not assume any level of financial knowledge based on someone's age. So I think often we try to put people into demographic buckets. And one thing that we found that is not a true indicator of financial knowledge is age. And so looking at the market research, we've come to find that in order to speak to this next generation of investors, it's really important to define the content and define the approach. I'm a very visual thinker, so in market research terms, the first in terms of content is to determine where that investor is in their financial life stage. So this will determine the content. There's certainly a spectrum of life stages here. There is everything from I am a college student to I have recently entered the professional world to I have a young family, right? So that's going to kind of plot that investor on that spectrum. And the second, which I think is even the more important aspect of it, is to determine the approach. So again, we kind of need to think about each individual and plotting them against two different axes. So the first is the level of engagement in investing. And again, everything is a spectrum. So from the, I don't even have a 401k all the way to I check my Robinhood account hourly. So plotting them along that. And the second thing to think about is their intellectual curiosity around investing. So what is their desire to know more, right? Is it from, I will never understand this and it does not interest me at all, to I'm a little scared, but I'm willing to learn more, to I actually stay up to date on all this. So again, just thinking about where that investor fits on some of those spectrums and within that axis will allow you to more intentionally tailor the content and the approach, again, for each individual investor.
That's great. Yeah, that's that's insightful. So again, we don't want to make assumptions here. We need to understand on an individual basis where someone might lie in terms of interest and engagement around investing, whether they're inheriting money or they're not. That doesn't change whether they're interested in investing or not. So that's interesting, and kind of finding out what life stage they're at. And that makes a lot of sense. So I'll open that up to Will or to Val as well.
Yeah, I would just add to that and say that, yeah, don't make assumptions. Use technology to speak to, speak to many people, but at the individual level, and be cognizant of some of the trends that Ryan and Val just brought out, which is sort of a greater awareness of environmental, social, governance criteria in investing. Without generalizing, I think it's fair to say that millennials and Generation Z, or zillennials, as I like to say, have a healthy degree of skepticism and don't stand on ceremony in sort of putting forward their beliefs and their ethical concerns and aspirations. And I think it's very important to acknowledge those, in your interactions with clients, whether you're building a bespoke portfolio or simply acknowledging, well, we want to invest in companies that are aligned with our values.
I really like that. If I could bridge what Ryan said and what Will said here and add my own little 2 cents, I think that wealth managers have a really amazing opportunity here, because you have research, you have knowledge, you have insights that they don't have. And the only thing that you're doing is the bridge to say, like to say, come to mama. Like we have this information here for you, and we're going to listen. And what you're in the business of doing is solving pain points. So once you let them know that you get them, and the way you do that is not assuming that the alpha male that the father decided typically is going to be the alpha male will ultimately be that, but instead have no assumptions and listen to each one. Then you can come back armed with solutions that are tailored. And in the process of listening and providing solutions, you lock in that support, and you're much better able to add. And then add some content that's literally fun. So when you think about, I'm just going to throw out an idea, which is crazy. When I think about this demographic that's Gen Z, like musically, they think differently and more broadly than we might in our own little areas. So let's bring some fun solutions and answers to the things that they don't know. And Ryan, I really love the double clicking one, the point that don't assume that age determines knowledge, because there's, or industry. There's so many people, they could be doctors and lawyers, but they haven't been taught. Who teaches people at school or elsewhere? And I think that most of the, this isn't, it's a little judgmental, forgive me. I think that much could be desired around the content that is used, and upgrade around that content to make sure that we're engaging this next generation of investors. And
I
I'd be
think
happy to help.
just a point on that, I love where you're going with this in terms of being kind of that trusted person to lead this investment. There is so much out there right now, right? It is truly the more is more world in terms of content. And we see this on the media side, that sense of trust around both newsroom personalities. You know, we're somewhat in the age of newsroom personalities, and that's very for a reason in the world of fake news today, right? Consumers want to be able to trust a brand or trust a face. And I think that ties directly back to the brand of being a financial advisor and being that person, to be that trusted person to kind of shepherd someone and curate and tailor what they need.
Yeah, so that's amazing. I think let's go into the alpha in a little bit. Val, you brought that in already, and I think we need to go there. I think let's stay on content for a minute. These are some just great insights. So we're not going to make assumptions about what people know, what life stage they're at just because of their age or anything else. We want to learn. And I think Will said it well. You know, you really do have to, it has to be personalized, a one-to-one basis. You need to start communicating with people. And today there is technology that's affordable to do that. I also heard the word listening. Please listen. We need to listen. Again, there's great technology out there that'll do that listening for you to each client and summarize what's important. So I think leaning on technology, to your point, Will, being one-to-one, using a more is more attitude. This is not normal for advisors. We typically only want to send a perfect piece of information at the perfect time once a quarter, and that's not the world we're in with content. We're in a younger world of more is more. And I'd like, Ryan, maybe in a sec, if you could just talk a little bit about what you mean. I heard a couple phrases, curated, tailored, and a more is more world. Can you talk a little bit about that, seeing the millions and millions of interactions every month?
Absolutely. So the more is more, I think that was from a commercial a while back, but I just love that phrase. You know, we are definitely in the more is more world. There are new mediums and more places to access content, right? So even over the course of the last 3 to 5 years, there are news aggregators like Apple News or YouTube or social media. Not only are there more places to access, there's more mediums. There is video, there are podcasts, there are audio articles, there are interactive graphics, there are GIFs. The list really goes on and on. So, I mean, that's great. No one has enough time. What does it truly mean? And what we're seeing is that there is really a shift towards more tailored experiences. And that's really what users are craving. They don't want to do the work because it's too much and it's too overwhelming. So again, they're looking for that trusted provider to cut through the noise and provide them with what they need. And I think a lot of what we're thinking about right now, and I think you mentioned earlier, Kevin, is around personalization. That's definitely a core component to these tailored experiences. I think the balance there and what we're trying to figure out is, from some of our research, you know, blind personalization can be a bit creepy to consumers at times. I think, you know, that's going to change. Netflix is certainly doing it and doing it well, and it's in every part of their platform. I think users are getting a bit more comfortable with that. So that's how it is right now, but I certainly see that changing in the future. But going back to tailored experiences specifically, I think what we're seeing right now are those tailored experiences and active pushes. So again, in not making them work and cutting through the noise, things like newsletters or desktop notifications, again, things that I sign up for that work within my current routine. So again, not working harder, doing the same thing I'm doing, but again, actively saying I want to receive this type of content, again, cutting through that noise. So I think that's very key to our strategy at Barron's. Excitingly, in May, we are launching Barron's Advisor, which similarly is going to be a subscription offering, which is going to be a blend of everything you know and love about Barron's, along with some additional content and tools, but again, interwoven into a digital experience so that it's not something new, it's already part of your routine. So again, I think that tailored experiences is really where it's at in the more is more world.
Right. Fascinating. So, and I'm going to go to, we're talking about this push alerts and, or you know, and I want to talk about, there's a lot of channels that we can use to get content out there. Push is certainly going to help when you're when you want to personalize, highly one-to-one personalization without being creepy. I think that is really important. But I think, you know, there's a fine balance between being worried about being creepy and providing people what they actually need. And understanding what they individually need. I think that's kind of win over.
And we see this all the time in terms of qualitative versus quantitative studies. What people say and how they act can sometimes be very different. So while you may think that you want a personalized newsletter that is going to give you exactly what you need because you may feel that that's creepy, it certainly may perform really well and actually be giving you exactly what you want. That's why I go back to, I think that's where we're at right now, but I think that consumer behavior is changing on that front. So I certainly expect that to change over the course of the next few years even.
Right. Yeah, we're seeing the same thing on our platform for sure. Will, I know in a couple of the dry run conversations, we were talking about multi-channels and how to be really effective. And so I'm just going to open it up to you from a technology point of view, if you want to make any comments in and around that.
Yeah, I mean, for sure, Kevin. I think the like Ryan was saying, I mean, the news sources are proliferating, and the channels out there that are available to communicate your message as an individual, as an investor, as an advisor, are proliferating as well. And you know, communicating on TikTok or Clubhouse is very different from sort of pushing out a traditional messaging campaign. I think another great point that you made, Ryan, is about, you know, putting content in the hands of users that is relevant to their needs, and you know, that has their blessing and is of interest. So, you know, permission is in, presumption is out. You know, don't spam me. And I think also, and you do a great job of this at Advisor Stream, Kevin. I mean, there's a real role for inbound marketing as well. Right? So put interesting content. Content is king or content is queen. Put it out there. Have your users, your audience engage with it and come to you with their questions and concerns and start a conversation. And that leads to a very healthy dynamic that's in fact the opposite of you know, the old school approach.
Okay, so I think that's also great insights there. Wealth firms need to be using all channels and trying to identify exactly what content should be used on. Traditional channels, I guess we could almost call social media traditional now, with new channels like Clubhouse and TikTok and all these other things coming up, which may be relevant channels for this more is more world content.
Yeah, and Kevin, on that point, I do think one thing that we've seen at Barron's in the pre versus COVID world, which I think a lot of other publishers and media sites are seeing, people are more accepting of new and different digital experiences, right? So you as an advisor should be too. And I think that test and learn mentality, we're at an interesting moment in world right now where we should use that to our advantage. One of the things that we did at Barron's right directly after the COVID, 2 weeks after we left the office, we said, how can we really engage with our subscriber base more directly? So what we launched within 2 weeks was something called Barron's Live, which was the ability for subscribers to connect directly with the newsroom every day. And again, it was new and different. We spun it up in 2 weeks. We weren't really sure how it was going to grow, but a year later, we've kind of developed this community amongst these subscribers who call in to be with the newsroom every day at noon. So I think consumers are so much more willing than they've ever been to try new things. I think we need to be equally as open to that as well right now to capitalize on the opportunity that's out there.
Yeah, definitely. And again, I think we were all kind of forced into it last March. Kind of like preparing for the great wealth transfer, having digital relationships, kind of like a dry run for the people we'll be serving in the coming years. But that's fascinating. So I did read a little bit about that. I think it's really cool just because I'm a news junkie and I love content, but kind of being able to connect right with the source. And I think advisors can take a parallel here, but being able to almost be in a page one meeting, right? Like be part of that team is ultra empowering almost. It's like you feel like you're part of that, the creation and what's going on in the conversation. And advisors being forced into that last March, I think are starting to realize they too can create community digitally. And so to your point, Ryan, accept, and to your point, Will, new digital experiences are your friend, right? Get comfortable with them, use them, and capitalize on them. They do all kinds of great things for us, like they have even for someone like Barron's who had to take on new things. So I think advisors and wealth firms, if Barron's, as big as it is, can experiment, I think wealth firms need to as well. Okay, let's move on to part three. We want to open it up a little bit at the end for questions. So I'm going to go to part three here, and we'll get rolling. Part three is the importance of content communication. So I kind of think we were already getting there. Just to set the stage here for this last part, I think it's important for advisors and firms to know, and they may already, but the second most frequent reason that investors cite for leaving their advisor or leaving a firm is lack of communication. Something that can be easily solved today with today's technology. There is a double-edged sword to communications, and I think we've all experienced this one time or another in our lives. All communications that need to be seen as valued by the recipient, by the investor. Clients who feel you're sending them completely irrelevant information, maybe for information related to a very different stage in the life cycle of an investor, are going to feel alienated. And in many cases, one LinkedIn study showed that 22% of investors have left a firm or an advisor to feeling not understood and receiving irrelevant content and communications. So this is a very serious thing. It's not something to just take random shots at. You really want to think through your communication strategy. But number one, if you don't communicate, your retention rates are going to go down. So I'm going to open this up, and I'm going to start with you, Will. How can a wealth management firm initiate a form of relationship with their clients' children and younger investors digitally? How should they be communicating? How should they start that communication with the children?
Great question, Kevin, and I think it's partly about communicating with them on their terms. I mean, we're seeing an increasingly mobile generation, right? So you've seen the emergence of Robinhood was mentioned, Webull, and others. Communicating. These are mobile-first platforms. They also have social component, right, where you're sort of whether you're using like a leaderboard type of function or exchange with other investors is very important. So this kind of mobile first collaborative approach, I think, is really the key. And look, I mean, part of the reason for the emergence of these platforms, Robinhood, confetti or not, is that investing should be fun, right? It's serious stuff, but it doesn't have to be, old and boring. And so being able to use the channels that younger investors use and that their children, but also communicate in a collaborative, very social way, I think is a big first step.
Okay, that's great. Any other comments around how to get it started, Val? I think you brought up the alpha child before. Do we start with the alpha child and ignore the rest of them, or do we try? How would you start this? How do you see the firms that you work with starting this conversation?
Acknowledging something that you said earlier, that someone's current level of wealth should not define their worth. And that's not been the case with the wealth management industry in general. You sort of go to who is in charge or who has the wealth. And I think making that very important shift will make a huge impact for your business, because many people who have been, again, ignored, the child at the table who couldn't talk, or the middle child, all these different categories that you can point to where someone feels less than because someone didn't just pay attention to them. So you want to say, I see you, I hear you, I want to get to know you. And one way to communicate is to use technology in a way, just like you send out a deck and you can see if somebody opened it and do they click through. Why not ask a question and survey them? What do you care most about? How about if we start with what matters most to you, because ultimately I value you. They probably haven't heard that, and if I went on a limb, they might not believe it. So it's not what you say, it's what you do. So if you reach out and say, I care about you, and again, I think I like what you said, Will, it's true. A lot of the information around money and finance is either boring or stressful. So I think it's important to even think about, and I'm just going to throw this out here. We talked about the more diversity. I think it's 38% of millennials, 48% of Gen Z identify as being diverse. That's different. And what comes along with that is a different relationship with money. And sometimes that difference is it's associated with trauma or a lack of, or it has a negative twang, if you will, when you're showing the positive and the possibilities. So coming and being aware of that, I think, is really helpful. And so the communication that says, look, you matter to me, and money can help you, and showing how it does. And the many women who are single moms, you want to say, if you do this, this is how you're going to help your children. You'll get them at hello. And I'm speaking from experience because I'm a single mom of 3 kids, was married for a while. But I look around, and if you look at the demographics, many people are in that role. So people want to know that you care about them and what they care about. So that's their children. So lead with content that will show them that, or the values, lead with content that will show them how they can invest and make a difference, and demonstrate in action, not just in words, that you care.
Okay, so start the conversation off, making sure that all of the household members know you care, be there to help them out, and show the spouse, whether that's female or male, how you can help the children out going forward as their advisor. Let's go to content a little bit. I think earlier we talked about there's changing trends in what topics people are really interested in, and I think Will just said, don't be boring. I think I would summarize what Will said, and I think you second that. We talked about ESG, but are there other topics going on? And let's go to Ryan here and what you're seeing across the United States in terms of trending, especially for youngers, Xers and millennials. Right before you get started, I would say that what we're seeing and what we're learning, and a lot of reports we're reading, are saying Xers don't trust advisors. We got to build that trust, and millennials actually do trust advisors. They just find them irrelevant and not sending relevant content. So with that said, building the need to build trust and to be relevant, how can we do that with topics, with content types? And we'll put this on Ryan's shoulders.
Absolutely, great question. And I think we've already touched on ESG. So what are the 3 other areas that I'm certainly seeing trends in? The first is retirement. So this has always been a well-engaged area of our site, but really in the past year, 3 of our top 10 stories were actually around retirement, including income investing. And I think that has a lot to do with the situation of today, right? There's a little selfishness in what does this mean for me and the future of my life. So retirement, is having a little bit of a moment right now. I think the other 2 trends, one is around tech and disruption. This has always been core to the Barron's editorial mission for the past 100 years. We're really about giving investors insights into the future. But really over the course of the past year, as the economy and society has changed, tech and disruption is no longer a topic. It's really it is now everything that we cover. It is at the forefront of all of our coverage. So I think tech and disruption, and kind of within that theme, but I will separate this out, is certainly cryptocurrency. So this, particularly for younger readers, but I think also for older readers who want to understand what is going on, people still don't fully get and are yearning to learn more around cryptocurrency. To give some stats, even in the past week, MarketWatch held their investing in crypto, and that was our our best attended live event with over 4,000 registrants. So there is certainly hunger for more information on the crypto side of things. So again, retirement, tech and disruption, and then cryptocurrency for sure.
Yeah, see, I don't think a year or 2 years ago we would have heard that, right? So it is a rapidly changing environment. So what I'm hearing here is start conversations relevant by being sending content that people actually want to read, that's important to them. Don't assume anything about what might be relevant. Find out, listen yourself when you're talking to clients, but also watch through technology what content is being consumed by your different clients. And maybe the topics that are resonating aren't the ones traditionally we would have expected, and even the mediums to deliver them, from what I'm hearing here. So we kind of jumped into the last question I had, is the expectations around content changing? So I'm just going to kind of open it up. Will, any other contents around or comments around building this initial relationship and using content that you'd like to make here?
Yeah, I would say you want to be where your clients are, be where the investors are more broadly, and so that's increasingly going to be social communities. And you know, this is actually not new. If you go back maybe about 15 years, there was this big concept of the wisdom of the crowds and how sort of rather than going to kind of the Harvard professor, you would sort of crowdsource information from different communities. And that's exactly what we're seeing in the world of investing. eToro, which is a big UK-based self-directed platform that's coming to the US, is practically built off social communities and allowing you to mirror trades carried out by other investors or peers. And so we're in a social world. I think being out there trying out these platforms, the TikToks, the Clubhouses is really important, and they won't all stick, and some of them will be gone in 5 years, but at least you're there, you're in the conversation, you're not stuck in old ways, and you're engaging with your audience. So I think that's key, Kevin.
Okay, great. Val, any overriding comments you'd like to make before we open it up for questions, Ryan and Val?
Sure. I think when we talked, there's some themes that come up over and over again. One is creating trust, making connection, listening, providing information in a way that's well received. And as we're ending on content, one way to do that is storytelling. So the more that you can get people on screen who's telling their story and how they did something, the more likely you are to draw someone in a way that is different than what has been done in the past. And if I can be helpful in any way to you, you have Kevin's information, you have mine. We're interviewing, to that end, we're interviewing people who've made choices along the way to improve their wealth and reinforce their worth. And so if we can make that available to you, we'd be happy to do that. And of all ages, different backgrounds, different ethnicities. But we think that that is going to help someone lean in to say, wow, they did it, I can do it too. Because there's a doubt. Sometimes there's a disbelief and there's a trust. So how do we get trusting individuals? And we're even testing out characters. So if you think about the space, my significant other is an astronaut and a doctor, and he loves these sci-fi movies. And you go to these sci-fi shows and there are all these really interesting creatures on screen. And imagine if we could put those interesting creatures in a storyline and it's about money and finance. That would be fun and that would be interesting, where we can not look at a color, but know that this is someone different. They might be struggling with one issue, to the point that you made, Ryan. There's so many issues. What about retirement? What do I do? What about, managing the health? And I think that that's going to be fun.
Ryan?
And the only thing that I'll add, I know we've been saying content is king quite a bit, but I think I'll just reiterate that in the world of fake news, trusted content is king. There is lots of information. There is an overabundance of information. So going back to the good stuff, and if you can be the purveyor of that good stuff to your clients, you're in a really good spot.
So what is
Can
your
I add
research?
one more thing?
Go
ahead, Val.
I was going to ask, what does your research show around how would a wealth manager, someone build trust? And how do they make that leap from just content to trusted content?
Yeah, and I think that goes back to a lot of what we're seeing around what I call personality journalism. So some of the new podcasts, the new newsletters are really focused on an individual making a brand for themselves and connecting with that audience. So at Barron's Group, we have the Streetwise podcast, which is Jack Heff, and it has really resonated with users over the last year. And it has to do with providing that voice. So again, it's not just here's the content, it's here's my take, here's my insights, and that personal touch and voice around your brand and in all of the touch points, whether that's for us a newsletter and a podcast and a video, but it's really around building that level of with your clients.
Excellent. Will, you had a comment? And
yeah, quick comment. I was going to say, this is all great advice. Keep in the back of your mind, remain compliant, right? We live in a global world. The US is still a bit of the Wild West in terms of content dissemination and engagement, but I mean, Europe and even Canada have very strict regulations regarding consent and communication. And I think you really need to work with a professional around your communication strategy to sort of guide that approach. And then, technology is your friend. Technology can help you keep on the right side of the regulator.
Yeah.
And can you double click on that a little bit, Will, just to say specifically what the wealth advisor should not do?
Yeah, so typically, I mean, for this webinar, depending on the market you joined, you had to click saying that your information could be used and passed on. California in particular has very specific rules about retaining information. This whole right to be forgotten issue that got Google in hot water in Europe is a good example as well. I think in terms of the content, and Kevin, you at AdvisorStream can speak to that. I mean, it's important to have the right to you're not going to just pirate and take and borrow other people's content. So it's about getting permission from your end users, typically a click for them to receive the content, but it's also what are you distributing? It's I mean, this is people's intellectual capital. I mean, all the great stuff you've mentioned, Val and Ryan, and that's your thinking, right? I can't just take it and blast it out to the world and say, hey, what a great thought. So I think those are the type of lines we need to keep aware of.
Okay, so that's excellent. I do want to make a couple by just commenting on what you've said here. I can answer 2 of the 180. We have 182 questions at the moment. We're not going to go through all 182, obviously, but I will answer with a comment 2 of them, I think. So first off, factual information. What the question is there a difference between marketing and communicating to clients versus prospects? So very, very quickly, I would say lean on email-based communications with your clients. Why? So you have a feedback loop and you know what they open and what they read, and you can literally learn about what's important with each client. With both prospects and clients, it should be factual. In this world of fake news, if you're trying to build a brand based on trust for millennials and relevance for, trust with Xers and relevance with millennials, you're going to have to use facts. These are smart generations, and fake news will not build a relationship. So there is a difference. Same but different question. Is there such thing as too much communication? If it's great, relevant, and factual, people will read it. People check their email about 76 times a day, and people say, well, maybe it's too much communication. Well, remember, you are unique, financial advisors and wealth management firms. These people have given you their money and expect you to guide them and help their family for their future, for their financial future. So they're going to want to hear from you. But when you are communicating with clients, try to lean on email-based communications. Obviously, with prospects, you want to get content, factual, relevant, trusted, current content out onto your social media properties and your website to pull people in, to show them what you do. Once you have that consent Will talked about, up in Canada, it's the Castle rules, which are brutally hard, but very, very good. In Europe, there are additional laws, CAN-SPAM laws around the world. So yes, make sure you're not communicating with people you don't have the right to communicate with. It's getting much more serious. When you do have that consent to communicate, make sure you're taking advantage of that by using factual, trusted content like Barron's content and other. There's a lot of great publishers out there. Don't use Jill's money tips or 5 ways to get rich quick. People obviously want to learn. It's about education, education, education. One other quick question. Do we have time for? Could you elaborate on ESG content what kind of content works around that, and similarly, probably for Will, how important is it to include and discuss long-term healthcare costs with families and members? Is that an important conversation? So I will open it up to you guys to comment however you will. Will, would you like to talk about the healthcare?
Well, yeah, and depending on what market you're in, and given sort of longevity and desires among older investors and boomers and younger, even for active lifestyle into their 90s, you have to have money saved up, right? And so, you know, prepare for the worst, or the worst being actually the best, that you'll live to 100, be out there playing tennis, but you know, you may need extra support and not just medical care, but also family support, helpers, and so forth. So you've got to plan for that.
Okay, great. And then I think we're gonna have to close it up there, right? We will be responding to everyone's questions. It may take us a few days, so please hang tight. There will be a recording of this session for everyone and anyone who would like it. And I just want to really thank the panelists today. I hope someday we could do this in person again, and I hope that's soon. I've worked with Will in the past. Valerie and Ryan, a total pleasure. We have a lot of questions for all three of you, and we would ask that you try to answer. We'll take some of them and we'll get rid of any that are repetitive. And if you could help us answer those. We had a massive crowd today, and I want to thank everyone for attending.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Thanks,
Thank you.
Val.
Good afternoon, all.
Ryan, nice to see you.
Bye now.